Well, cool. So welcome to our webinar, and thank you. I usually try and start with a big thank you to those of you that have decided to spend some time with us today. And today I'm really delighted to be joined by some colleagues from North Shore Automation. Those of you who have been in the CatDV world for some years will know that we've worked alongside our chums at North Shore for some while. And in the last year, we've really stepped up our partnership. So there's quite a lot that we do when collaborating on large projects, as well as on powerful integrations. And today, we're going to be talking about one of those integrations, one that has been around for a while, but has just had a really cool new refresh. So we're going to be talking about CatDV with Telestream Vantage Workflows. So you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to read all these words out, but what this page is trying to say is that CatDV and Vantage are pretty amazing companion products. So Vantage is all about media processing and media services, from ingest, transcode, delivery, distribution, QC, and all that kind of cool stuff. Whereas CatDV is a media management and workflow orchestration platform. So we help folks with lots of media to be able to manage, organize, and collaborate, just keep themselves in good shape. So the two products work really well together, and there must be hundreds of deployments around the world that use both these tools together. And so we're really pleased that we have an even better integration than we previously had. So let's just quickly recap what it is that we do with CatDV with our integration provided by our North Shore chums. So V1 of the integration has been around for some years, right? And that allows you to initiate workflows from CatDV and tell Vantage to go and do stuff. So, you know, maybe you want to do a transcode, maybe you want to do a delivery. Press a button in CatDV, Vantage goes and does its stuff. Vantage tells CatDV how well it's doing, and everything's great. V2 is the cool new one. And this is for us in CatDV to just watch what Vantage is doing without us having to kick off a workflow and then know a workflow's happening. We can just watch what Vantage is doing and then update CatDV, which is really cool. So we'll see that in the demo later. So, and then, you know, we'll probably cover these benefits several times as we go through, as it becomes clear how this stuff works. But why would you want to do that? Why would you want to use Vantage and CatDV together? Well, there's two main reasons. Number one, CatDV is a persistent database. So if you want to have a look back in 6 months' time and say, did that transcode happen? Did we deliver that file? What actually went on that day? So that tracking, that history, that reporting for compliance purposes, for audit purposes, CatDV initiating and watching Vantage jobs really enables you to have real control over what has actually happened and be able to prove it after the event sometime afterwards. And then also, the second benefit is about providing a user interface. And I'm saying user rather than admin interface. Vantage provides a great user interface for administrators to set up, configure, and monitor workflows. But if I'm in a production team and I just want to deliver a file, I don't really want to be able to talk to Vantage. I might break things. It's so complicated that I just don't want to go there. And you know, my media manager really doesn't want me to go there. So by using CatDV to initiate workflows and to see what's going on in Vantage, almost to provide a dashboard of what Vantage is up to, then we can use CatDV as that user interface and only expose those things that we think are really valuable for users to do, not administrators. Nobody can do any damage. Nobody can make inadvertent changes. Nobody can make workflows break, but people can still use that immense power that sits in the Vantage platform from CatDV. So, hopefully those benefits make it pretty clear why we're pretty excited about this latest integration that we've got North Shore showing us today. And I'm going to try and be quiet for a little while and hand over to Bryson, who will give us a quick overview and demo of what we now have. So I'll stop screen sharing and hand over to you, Bryson.
Hey, Dave, thank you very much. Yeah, let me jump in here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this thing rolling out. So sorry about that. Get this done. Here we go. So we're going to run through some of our technical documentations. Actually, just going to use these as slides today. So there we go. You have the block diagram up there now, Dave. We can see everybody there.
Yep.
Excellent. All right. The application, the way the application is set up originally, and this was a design that's part of sort of North Shore's middleware product line. And so the block diagram for CatDV Vantage is actually It is a standalone application. I'll say this on Damien's behalf. A lot of people are like, oh, your scripts, because these applications are written in Python, but they're not actually Python scripts. They're actually written as fully compiled and licensed applications. Part of the reason for that is that it really allows you to, you have two really powerful products with CatDV and Vantage. So a lot can go on between them. So North Shore is handling things like job queuing independently. So you can handle error correction, things like that. So we try to take that off of both sides of the operation. And for people that know us all together, the three companies, they kind of know how tightly we work. We all try to, as you know, you and I talk about, we all try to make each other look good. So with the workflow, the CatDV application is actually split in two internally. And we call this out, although it's not two applications, it's two separate processes. One is that we use work orders to submit. The reason is that work orders are very, very powerful. They allow you to flexibly deliver different metadata schemas to Vantage. Any of you who are, old dogs with Vantage know all about work orders. But then, as you know, dropping text files, while that's a fine way to initiate a job and get data in, it's not the best way for communication between applications. So we actually use the web services APIs, both the CatDV and Vantage, to actually monitor and transmit metadata back and forth. So what's really happening here is the worker node is triggering our application. The worker node's not creating the work order. That's important because we build a lot of logic into our application about how those work orders are formatted. And you can add your own workflows to V1 really easily. And that's a really big thing that I know Damien really focused on, was the idea that you could buy this. And once you know how to use V1, if you know Vantage, you can actually put your own workflows in, so you don't need some big professional services engagement for V1 to do workflow. What starts to happen is we are actually looking for, and this is the genesis of V2, we're looking for jobs that we submitted in Vantage. So we're constantly monitoring Vantage. About every 15 seconds we check in. If nothing's happening, we don't report to CatDV. Again, why mess up your CatDV dinging that server all the time? Why bother your server and your perfectly good CatDV workflows if you're not doing anything? But when something's happening in Vantage, we actually start to report. We report status, we report metadata, and we can report error states, things like that. Your part that you mentioned was really, really key, was if you have a lot of users, we try to be, gentle with the users, but maybe you have some users that are less technical, we'll say, to be politically correct. And then a less technical user, they may or may not understand that error that's coming back. So you get a chance in CatDV to tune those errors a little bit, or not have everyone have to go look at Vantage. We joke that if you're a Vantage system administrator, you can actually have a much better experience because your user doesn't have to ask you if something's gone wrong. They can tell you, and you can quickly troubleshoot or, look at that. Again, the workflow happens and we update status. So I'll show a kind of a typical workflow here we want to go through for a V1. This is an unusual one. It's a transcode. While, CatDV, as you guys always say, and we agree, it's one of the best proxy flippers in the world. Sometimes people use Vantage for scale, for other reasons. They use it alongside the worker node. So in this case, we're actually making a proxy, though it's the same for any transcode. The reason we call this out is that, as you know, CatDV proxies need to be placed in a very specific place in order to be viewed by CatDV. And so this is an example in this simple workflow where we're actually telling it using CatDV variables where to place this file. So it's not just a random output. So, user or a system says we want to make a proxy, the worker node picks that job up, submits the selected work order to the selected Vantage workflow. Again, you can have hundreds of workflows in your Vantage, and CatDV can work with, just certain ones of those. It reads the original file, creates a proxy, and it's viewable in CatDV. This, as you said, this is sort of a one-way workflow. V1 was all about CatDV telling Vantage to do something and giving it metadata and then receiving assets back. I think I'm going to turn it over to Allison. Allison, do you want to walk through a workflow here? Is that cool for right now? Do that?
I think this is a perfect place to show a little demo.
Excellent. All right, let me get over here and grab a video. We're going to run a video because obviously we joke about this. When you're running an enterprise system, it's not like you just fire it all up on a laptop. So let's take a look here, Allison. I'll go ahead and kind of let us know what we're going to see here. This let me kick off. This is the. Hang on a minute, excuse me there. Let me go back to the V1. Here we go. There you go.
Perfect.
You're up.
Okay, so guys, here we are in our CatDV desktop client. you see I have this master catalog and it has some clips in it. And from those green dots, you can see that they have both high-res and proxy files available for playback. If you pause it there for a second, Bryson, perfect.
Yeah.
What I did is I'm going to bring in some more files into CatDV. I'm just going to manually ingest those into that master catalog. And what you saw is the client's going to start analyzing those assets for us. Now, this is where we typically would either use the CatDV desktop client or the worker node to create some proxies for us. But today, we're going to show you how we're going to use CatDV in the worker node to trigger those Vantage workflows. The same way I would before, I would select all of those newly ingested clips and then change that Vantage action field to create proxy. So now we're going to switch over into the worker node and we'll see that those files have been picked up in that worker node action. Again, though, instead of the worker node doing that transcoding and creating those files, this is going to trigger that North Shore Vantage application. Once the worker node action successfully completes, we can jump into Vantage to see that workflow monitor. The power of this Vantage application is that during these workflows, you're going to continue to get status back in CatDV. So yeah, we'll get into the client, Bryson, and then we'll pause that video. Because while status is updating in Vantage, if you pause it right here, you'll see I'm also getting Vantage percentages back, which is, again, is really important because we're not just sending something back into space and we don't know if it's completed, we don't know if it's working, we don't know if it's going on yet, is it in progress? You'll also see we've got this Vantage workflow state. So you'll know that these workflows are currently active versus if they were just in process waiting for them to be picked up there.
That's really big when you're dealing with scale. You know, we have clients that do, I think we have one client using this, I should mention, Dave, that does 22,000 jobs on a Sunday afternoon. And so you can imagine, you know, when they're live on an event, you would have a lot of jobs that you'd need to track status for at any given time in CatDV. So
yeah, and you know, and I mentioned one of the other benefits was around compliance and reporting. So in that field there, we can see there's a Vantage log field. So one of the cool things that your integration does, it provides good logging that just says exactly what it's done and when it's done it, so you can prove exactly what has CatDV sent to Vantage and what has Vantage been told to do, and you can be confident then that stuff's been done right.
Yeah, that's a really big thing that Damien added. You know, Damien's got decades of experience troubleshooting and fixing things in the field. So this application, like all our middleware, it's really clear. And we try to make sure that we don't overload the user. Obviously, this panel wouldn't be visible to everyone. You could pull a single field. You know, a casual user might see the percentage and the workflow state in a view. You know, they wouldn't see the rest of it. But we have all of this so that if somebody does need to monitor it and look at it, and again, like you said, prove what happened, right? And we joke that like that kind of data solves a lot of arguments. You know, so, but I did it. No, you didn't do it. So, all right, Allison, I'll let you go back. What you got? Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, if we keep playing the video, what we're going to see is in Vantage, it's going to tell us that those jobs have completed. Pause it over.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so running through.
Jobs have completed, and then back in the client, this is where you'll see our statuses have changed. We're now at 100%. I've got a completed workflow state, and then best of all, I've got those proxies that are viewable in either our web client or in our desktop client. And this is, again, this is really the powerful thing that we're making sure that those paths, like you said, Bryson, get put, and those proxies get put in the correct location, because we want to make sure that we're able to play those back.
Another point here is that in the web, is another thing that's really important is the web client. So monitoring the web client, if you're an administrator, you don't have to be at your desk. You can pop in really quickly. You can pop in from the Vantage server and check CatDV. So when it's a really nice thing that having web clients on a CatDV rig, you know, so often we use the desktop interface, but the truth is that you can also give people a view of this. And one thing that we do a ton at North Shore is we use the views in the web client. We'll just use a web client view. If we go back here a little bit, there we go. Sorry. We'll use a view like this as a queue or a status. So you could have a view that would say a smart folder that says only show me Vantage jobs that are active, or show me from the last day. And then basically people have a web dashboard they can look at. So if you've got a lot of jobs happening, if you're in like a big broadcast environment, you could just leave this up on a big screen, and you would, by constantly having it refresh, it would show Vantage status all day long.
Yeah,
So
and for those folks that joined one of our webinars a few weeks back and saw about how we can set up colored label fields really simply, that kind of big visible dashboard, being able to flag jobs in progress in orange, jobs pending in blue, jobs finished in green, all of that kind of stuff makes it all much more visually attractive as well. And all of that's really not hard with CatDV.
we're literally doing that right now, Dave, for a client. And it was really fun this week. The stakeholder asked me, well, I need a report of that, and it's so great when you're at that point in a CatDV deployment where you can say, well, your people have been trained to do this. And we were able to make them, what do you want to see? When do you want to see it? And so that was it's a really cool thing. I mean, I think we focus so much on workflow on these talks, and automating and stuff. But it's really about like, can I know what's actually happening? You know what I mean? Like that's a really big deal. Is like, can I actually know and see what's going on in my operation? And that's the thing I think for North Shore in the last couple of years, our collaboration getting tighter has been great. I think that's one of the things that we even brought to Squarebox was the idea that, because you guys talk to the clients and the clients so often were like, we're doing this, but it's great to see what's going on. And for management, I think CatDV is a management tool. A DAM is a management tool. I don't think, and we talk about managing the assets, but really for like the process and the people, it's really powerful.
Yeah. So could you talk about that a bit? So, I mean, that was a cool demo of CatDV telling Vantage to make a proxy, but in some of our larger kind of co-deployments that we've done with North Shore and our customers, then there's been a whole pile of other things that we've done, deliveries, master transcode, add insertions. Could you talk a little bit about how some of our customers have used this kind of V1 workflow to help solve their problems?
Yeah, that helps. That leads us to V2, obviously, that because this all came from customer feedback. So, so you mentioned distribution. It's a really big part of our business now. We'll talk maybe a little more later in that, but absolutely. So, for instance, you can buy these pre-built broadcast setups from Vantage, from Telestream. So you can go in and say, oh, well, I need to make a delivery to, this format to go out to, broadcaster A in as a Grass Valley GXF or whatever it is. And so that's a really big one because, again, a lot of times those workflows get they become pinch points where you have this one person, Sarah or Frank or whoever who does the outputs. And so by putting this into CatDV, someone else can sort of, like we said, they sort of safely do that workflow. So it's a really big deal to be able to do that. And then also we see that being able to use the CatDV metadata. Again, you can take someone who knows the metadata and someone who knows the media. And in the old days, they would have to take that and hand off a spreadsheet or something or a CSV and then give it to them. Now someone can just type into CatDV web, create the record that they want to distribute, and then hit the button and it'll actually take all that metadata, deliver that path and that metadata to Vantage, and Vantage does the delivery. So that's a really big part. And that actually transformed our whole business, being able to do that. The other one is Mezzanine Workflows. Right? Being able to do some specific kind of edit mezzanine for your team. That's a really big one. So, when you get into professional broadcast formats, when you get into mezzanines, and then the last one that's interesting, and this is where I think this is really cool that like CatDV and Telestream, Squarebox and Telestream have overlap, is that Vantage is not just a transcoding tool. Vantage is a complete media platform. So it moves files. It does all sorts of things. And what we found is that we would find that there were separate teams, so to speak. There's the Vantage people and there's the CatDV people. And we really wanted to blend that. We wanted to give the Vantage people, like you said, the ability to retain metadata, which is a really big deal for them. And then we wanted to be able to the CatDV people, the ability to use some of these really powerful pre-written available workflows that Telestream has. So that was the thing of like, why rewrite it if it exists in Vantage? That kind of leads me.
And that's a big thing. So in those distribution workflows, being able to prove you sent something out is pretty crucial. And just using Vantage on its own, you can go and search through logs and all that kind of stuff, but it makes it much more visible with CatDV. So cool. That sounds like a cool segue into V2.
Yes. So this is a funny thing where we talk about, like, let me really bring this up and I'll talk a little bit about V2 and we'll show a workflow in a second here with it. But one of the interesting things is that we talk at North Shore, we use this a lot. We feel like we try to have, it's a weird thing to say for a company, we try to have sort of a level of humility. And what we mean by that is that we're not here to force someone into a workflow. And so what we'd find is we would go into these shops and we would work on something, and then we would find out that they had really great existing Vantage workflows. Or we were, as most recently happened, we were adding CatDV into a shop that was really heavily automated with Vantage. And I could come in and say, oh, you could move all this, but the truth is that that doesn't really make sense. I mean, it actually it's a fully functional workflow. But like you said, we needed people, for instance, they wanted to share to a lot of people. So you can have an asset sitting in a Vantage catalog that people could access, but then like you said, you've got 100 people, 200 people accessing your Vantage, which you may not want, or even just from an IT perspective, that's sometimes difficult. So in this case, came back, as usual happens, that I talk to somebody and have some crazy idea, and then I come back to Damien and he groans and rolls his eyes, and then makes it all happen. so this is one of those great collaborations with the North Shore dev team, and what we're really doing here is that like you said, we allow Vantage to drive the workflow, and CatDV is recording and responding. And so the engineers who are well-skilled in Vantage can build workflows in Vantage and have them operational, and CatDV can sort of float on top. So you've got this case where CatDV becomes like you'll hear me say it over and over, like a dashboard, a place to hold information. And your point about long-term retention is a really big deal. But in the original idea for this, the client was receiving, I think the one we're going to show today is like an extreme reach workflow, but clients receive assets and metadata. Well, normally if you were a CatDV engineer, you'd be like, well, I'll just take that metadata file and I'll build another transformation for CatDV. So Vantage will ingest it and then the worker will ingest it. And obviously that is completely doable, but it's not as efficient. And it doesn't really make you for a unified media platform, right? So having a unified platform, we decided, okay, well, let's set that and take the monitoring of our actions and sort of almost subscribe to workflows. Damien, pitch in if I get off base here. If I'm, this is all new for me, and so
no, that's exactly right. As you pick your workflows to subscribe to, and we can map all of the Vantage metadata to CatDV fields.
That's the big deal, is that so Vantage receives this metadata, and they have labels, variables, which are fed by variables, and so those can be mapped with into CatDV fields as well. So with that though, one of the interesting things about Vantage, and I will say is one of the heaviest bits of learning we've done. North Shore has to sort of learn a new app every so often. The last couple of years, Telestream's been really great. The Telestream engineers, if you guys own Vantage, you already know their engineers are top notch, but they've also been really cool to share knowledge with us. And so one of the key things about this is that when you're running a Vantage workflow, you don't actually get the publishing, because it wouldn't make sense until the end. So those labels don't lock, so they could be transmitted to CatDV till it knows that the job is done, which totally makes sense. So we needed a way that we could know that a job was in progress or happening, but it might not result actually in a clip, because it could fail or something could be wrong with it. And Vantage goes, oh, they've sent the wrong format or whatever. So Damien, the guys came up with the concept of a tracking clip, which can live in a tracking catalog. And so when something kicks off in Vantage for a job, we're going to create a tracking clip in CatDV, which is a temporary clip that is persistent during the job, are really critical during the job. And then at the end, when Vantage says everything's good, then we'll publish that over into your final destination catalog and your final clip record. So let me get to a workflow and kind of talk about what that looks like. And again, Allison, Damien, anything that y'all want to bring up that you feel like I should address, let me know. Excuse me a second here. I just realized that I've talked through that whole thing without my slide up. So this is what I was actually doing. Damien, Allison, protect me from myself. I am a mere mortal. So tracking catalogs, tracking clips, temporary, final clip, final catalog. There we go.
Yep, that all made sense to me.
Excellent. All right, now moving through into we're going to show, this is a watch folder ingest workflow that you would see in an operation. Let me get that guy scaled right. And so, like you would normally see, like we said, normally anyone who's a CatDV old hand knows about this, or Vantage we've got a sidecar coming in MPEG-4, video file coming in, and Vantage is watching it. If you notice, the worker node's way over here in this workflow. So Vantage ingests the asset, extracts the media, at this point, it also moves the asset to a new storage location and, wherever that's going to be. We've sensed that that's happening. And we start monitoring and we create this tracking record up here that, grayed out because you're not normally looking at it. Again, it's something that maybe an admin would watch. It's also a great dashboard. You could put that up in a web client. All of a sudden you're like, oh, I got jobs kicking off here. And you could see, Dave, like you said, by those colors, oh, I've got an error, I've got a problem. You immediately know that right in your interface for CatDV. Once that workflow is done, all the metadata that's been mapped into CatDV fields gets injected into the CatDV server, record, and then that's viewable. And we can publish to whatever catalog you want using variables or any of your CatDV logic. So again, that's where it's kind of a cool thing is that you have your CatDV team that can control kind of these parts of it once it's done. Vantage team is just feeding to them. And actually, in some of these workflows, I think that what we're going to see for clients is that there are very different audiences, very different teams. So it's this thing where they can collaborate engineering wise, and the Vantage team or, kind of ops can say, hey, okay, now you take your data and go and do whatever you want to with it, but we're going to keep this Vantage operation running. And then we'll just pick up and monitor another thing. One of the last things I do want to point out, because it's something that's important, is CatDV will then reanalyze that media. When you see an actual asset come in, it's just an empty clip, not an empty clip record, but it's a clip record that's not had thumbnails and metadata pulled. One of the things that you mentioned to me early on when we were talking about this, Dave, was the fact of a third-party verification. That's a really big deal, absolutely. You could have a secondary check that says not only is Vantage supposed to put it here, but CatDV says, yes, it actually is there, and it is the right format, it is the right frame rate, everything's right. So if you do have sort of disparate teams that are separated, you can sort of check each other's work between the CatDV automation and the Vantage automation. So, Allison, is that something that you want me to move back into a demo there?
This is a perfect place for another demo. Let's get into it.
All right, hang on just a sec.
Let's see the magic, right?
Let's look the magic happening on. Here we go. Let me grab the V2. All right, here we go. Let me go back up to the top of this guy here for you. And there we go. All right, let me know when you want me to kick it off.
Yeah, I will. We'll talk first. So we're going to jump back and forth a little bit between Vantage and CatDV again, so we can make sure we're seeing all of that monitoring that really gets to happen. But again, so I'm in Vantage here, and I have this extreme reach ingest workflow. If you want to start it off, Bryson, we're good here.
Great.
I have in that workflow a designated watch folder location. And so here I'm dropping in some media files and those associated sidecar XMLs. Now here's where you'll see, actually I'm going to pause it. We'll just make sure that we talk about this. This is that tracking catalog that we were talking about. Again, a great place where we can get status, a great place where we can see what's going on in our system. This is some tracking records or clips that have already been completed. So these are now finished jobs. What you'll see is that in here, these tracking clips will then create and link to our soon-to-be CatDV media clips. I can pause this and keep going.
Okay.
Or sorry, play it.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then what we're going to start seeing is we're going to jump into Vantage, and then that monitor is going to detect some new files that have been placed inside that watch folder. So here's our monitor. It tells us, hey, I've got some new files in here. And then we're going to look at that status of the job to see the progress and where it is in the workflow. In this Vantage workflow, we're going to
Yeah, we should stop for a second to show, this is an example of like what some would consider a fairly simple Vantage workflow. So, this is their editing information. So again, a lot of these workflows that people have put a ton of work in, I just want to call that out, that's really about what V2 is about preserving the work you've already done rather than reduplicating or replacing it. But sorry, I just want to catch that. So, and there's our progress status down here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So what this workflow is building is it is extracting all of that metadata from those sidecar XMLs, making some deciding factors, and then it's also going to be moving those media files and the XMLs outside of our watch folder. Again, what you'll start seeing here is I'm back in the tracking catalog, and with that power of those Vantage the North Shore Vantage applications, our tracking record is going to continue to give us status. So now this is actually, we only have one job, and it's pretty small, so you're not going to see as much status here. If you press play, I think it's going to jump to some percentages.
Yeah, 74.
It depends on how big. Yeah, if we've got bigger jobs and bigger workflows here, you're going to get even more detailed percentage status and what actually is happening in the system.
Cool.
If we keep going, we're going to jump to Vantage one last time. Awesome. And then we'll see that that job is completed. And now in the web client or in our desktop client, I have a few ways to actually view those newly ingested media files. I can either open up that ingest catalog and see the metadata that we grabbed from that XML. So this, again, this is the ingest. These are those media files. It looks kind of similar to that tracking catalog, but now these are the actual media files here with those associated clips. Or if I wanted to, a great feature that I really love is that I'm going to jump back into the tracking catalog, and I now have the ability to click on this hyperlink. So this can be my view, my dashboard. Now I want to go to the actual clip. Just click on that nickname, that original nickname that we got from Vantage. Do you want to hop in, Bryson? Yeah.
I want to call this out. Yeah, because this is something that I was talking to Dave about before we got started. This is a CatDV feature, and this is a great example of the web client becoming extendable, the web client expanding. So you can create a hyperlink inside CatDV. So what? And to Damien's credit, nobody requested this. This is just a really cool thing. So now the tracking catalog can actually link to the media file that came in with it. So you can now associate not only those clips, but the media together. This is a powerful thing. I just want to call out that even if you don't buy this product, you can add these links to CatDV now, and it's really, really cool. So the JavaScript API and a lot of the things that you can do in CatDV now have really made like really cool things like this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit play. So you click on the asset.
Yeah, if you hit play, yep, once I click on that hyperlink, it's going to take me right to the media file. Again, it's in that ingest catalog, and I'll get all of that Vantage tracking information as well as
here we go.
the metadata.
Pause this. Yeah, let's take a look at that extreme reach metadata right there. There we go. So this is what came in. So this is the original title. There's the house ID that was sent. There's a broadcast ISKI, a broadcast title. And the media nickname is what came in. That's originally from the Vantage workflow. So that's
from Vantage. Yep.
Yeah, that's actually a great moment to stop and talk for a second. So Dave, let's talk a little bit about because that nickname is important. Luckily I got Damien on here because that part gets pretty complex. Let's talk a little bit about what you might do in a V2 workflow in this thing here. So the nicknames are important. And again, I'll ask Damien and Allison to keep me on the straight and narrow here with that, is that when you're bringing something in, and here let me go ahead and actually bring up that drawing again. We'll talk a little bit about this. So you might have a situation where a V2 workflow was monitoring something that was creating more than one record. So maybe it was splitting. One of the things, Dave, you mentioned workflows. One of the things that you could do is you could segment a piece of media. So we could have this media and we could make 5 or 6 pieces of media from it by chopping it according to a list that was pre-provided. If you did that, then Vantage would create a nickname for each of those resulting assets. So let's say we're going to split it into 4 things. So we have the original asset, which has a catalog record. And then you would have 4 nicknames while the workflow runs, and they would be given probably specific internal names. And then at the end, they would be named and created. So those nicknames can turn into CatDV records. So that's a great chance. We're talking about showing there that there's metadata, in this case, coming into the workflow. There's temporary metadata that Vantage is using to perform these operations, and CatDV is aware of those through our application. And then there's decisions that are made as to how those nicknames get renamed into actual assets, and they become, I joke, they become a real boy in the Pinocchio sense. They actually turn into clips in CatDV and media.
Yeah, no, that's important. So, I mean, and that's a kind of play out workflow. So, what we're using Vantage for is to get in a piece of finished media, and then before we go to play out, we're going to split it into 4, 6, 8 segments, which is going to be the content that goes around the ad breaks. And as you say, so one inbound file can create 6, 8 outbound files, all of which with this workflow, CatDV can be made aware of, ingest, and then used for a whole pile of other stuff. So whether it be deliveries, whether it be QC, whatever, that's very cool. And I like bringing this back down to real world. So that's a nice example. Yeah.
Thanks, man. I'm going to take us out of the screen share for a second. We'll just kind of run through and go through with you. I would like now, let's talk a little bit about that. Like, so at this point, it's early, you know, this is still being right now deployed and debugged, kind of our first run on these. The two main things that we've got going right now are those workflows. We have the, you know, sort of the ingest with metadata to, you know, through Vantage, big deal. And then the second one is actually running a workflow that is, creating segments and actually creating those new assets. That's again leads us into distribution world, which is kind of a whole other place for us. I think the thing that we should talk about now a little bit is kind of how you deploy this, right? How does this come in? A lot of our customers already have this V1. What does it look like to do it? So why don't you and I talk a little bit about that in this, you know, is how that puts together.
So. I can do that, or we can do that even. No, I think that's a good point, right? So V1, it's been on the price list for some time, being able to take your existing Vantage workflows and initiate them from CatDV. So we have a number of SKUs. It's on the price list, so the product can be bought. There are deployment services from our chums at North Shore and support and all that kind of cool stuff. So that's kind of a moderately straightforward, packaged, easy to visualize, easy to scope thing, right? Because you're just kicking off workflows that either already exist or that are being built, right? V2, and one of the reasons we're running, pardon me, that's the doorbell. So V2, on the other hand, is a lot more powerful as a product. And part of the reason for running this webinar is because we love learning from our customers. So we know a few workflows that V2 is going to be massively useful for because we're using it between us live with some customer deployments. But the reason for running this webinar is to engage with our other stakeholders to say, well, hey, how would you use it? Can you see workflows or customer engagements or your engagements that could make use of V2 differently? Because then we will actively listen. What that means in practice is because V2 is so powerful and so flexible, some consult is worth having. You know, having a conversation with us, having our conversation with Bryson and his team, so that we understand exactly what you want to do. That's going to make it a lot more powerful, usable, valuable. Yeah. So essentially, that's the kind of key message. V1, easy, just buy it. We've already got it on the price list. That's easy. V2, we just love the conversation. It helps us to learn, make sure that you get the best workflow.
Yeah, and again, that we're not stepping on somebody's toes, right? You know, we really want to consult and talk. We usually talk to Telestream and work with those guys really tightly. Yep. Dave, one thing just for time, we got great questions, so we should actually if we can get to Q&A. It's really funny. I just laughed at it's really great. Some of the questions are things that I wanted to talk about. Well,
just before we do, let me just do a quick pitch for next week, right? So
please, yeah.
We do this every week. So first off, if we don't get to your question in the Q&A, then we have a You Can Book Me for next week going for Vantage questions. You can engage with us and we'll engage with our North Shore chums to make sure the right people are involved. So you want a one-to-one? Book up on catdv-vantage.youcanbook.me, and this link will go out with the video recording shortly, and we'd be pleased to have a discussion as we just talked about. So that would be great. We want to have those chats. Next week, we're talking about MasterCat. So being able to take multiple CatDV systems and share media, share metadata, move media, move metadata, at a large scale between CatDV systems. And we'll be showing stuff we announced a couple of months ago, but we haven't shown it in live yet. So that's going to be quite exciting. Matthew and I will be doing that one. There's a reminder button behind my head. So there's free tech advice for remote setup, and I think a few more weeks to go on our free web clients for those folks that need that. So again, do talk to us if you would like some of that. And then we're back to Q&A. So, okay.
Excellent.
Great.
If you're cool, if you want, if it's okay, if I run through, I'm going to run through some of them. There's some great.
Well, if you want to run through, normally Hannah does that, but no, you choose them.
Oh, Hannah, do you want to? Hannah, I don't want to steal Hannah's gig.
Go through them. You're more than welcome to.
Okay, Hannah, excellent. Yeah, so we have one from Miguel asking, saying, I love it using my name. The guy's name, Ralph, has to redefine his proxy path, and so absolutely with that one, you know. Redefining a proxy path could be done because we're using CatDV variables. So anything that you can do in CatDV to deliver data through a variable, we can absolutely do that. So know that, that's a big part of this, is being able to have the flexibility in CatDV. That could be auto sensed variables, or those could be variables that, like, you could select certain proxy paths. For instance, you could say, oh, I have 3 or 4 proxy locations in a big distributed workflow, and you could say, yeah, make it here first in case maybe it's synchronizing or something. But you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
maybe
for
that's
sure.
not a point that we've made loud and clear as we've gone through, but being able to share CatDV metadata and variables from CatDV and Vantage variables, that's just kind of comes out of the gate with the integration.
Yeah,
So
that's V1
that's
and ready to go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I have to answer. This is really great. But Tim asks us, and it's super geeky. I appreciate the level of geekiness in these questions. That's why I got excited. Says, why not use some type of messaging framework like Rabbitmq or something? North Shore makes heavy use of Rabbitmq. It's not needed in this workflow. And as a result, one of our questions comes from a customer who puts through many tens of thousands every week of jobs. So we don't need Rabbitmq here, but we actually do use that messaging system for quite a bit of our middleware for really high volume things.
Yeah, and about a year and a half ago, we introduced CatDV's messaging system, which is immediate messaging, which allows things like progress bars and immediate metadata updates, whether the worker, the desktop, or the web clients are making changes. So we have a messaging infrastructure inside CatDV that provides for immediacy. And I think that's probably quite a change from those folks that have known CatDV for maybe 10 years before that. Yeah. So I mean, so maybe
we have 2 methods.
Yeah, 2 methods.
Yeah.
So one of the things we saw on a webinar a couple of weeks ago was just drag stuff into a CatDV web uploader, see CatDV progress spinners and progress bars for workflows as they go through, as proxies are made, as thumbnails are made, analyzes are done. So yeah, I mean, I think that immediacy notifications is absolutely part of the plan.
Great. What versions are required? Damien, can you talk to me about V2? What's the minimum requirement for Vantage of V2?
Well, Telestream was unclear about whether it was 7.0 or 7.1, but it's Vantage 7.
Okay, great. That's perfect. And then on the CatDV side, am I right that it kind of doesn't matter because of their cool API structure, right? We could really go
because we do develop in an API first kind of way. So we eat our own dog food, we write the APIs, and then we write the code that uses them, whether it's for our web client, desktop client, or worker. But we do encourage people to use the most recent stuff. So Server 9 that we put out a couple of months ago, it's got some pretty big improvements in it, and we want everybody to be using it. So that's our guidance.
Absolutely. Great. Cool. Ken asked a question about lower res proxy editing in Adobe Premiere with shared CatDV proxies. That's really a CatDV question. I think you should reach out because yes, the answer is yes. And there's all kinds of stuff in that.
Yeah.
But that's where you would get into media stores, Dave, multiple media stores, for instance.
So we had a webinar, I think about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, which went through our latest Adobe workflow. I think we're on the 4th or 5th iteration of our Adobe panel. And what that panel does is allow us to download proxies from a remote location. So you've got your normal facility sitting there somewhere, either on-premise, data center, or cloud. You're in the Premiere panel. You say, okay, great, I want this content. CatDV will download those proxies, actually physically download them to that local machine, so you can do a proxy-based edit. If you're making any FX locally in After Effects or bringing in new content, bring that into your Adobe bin. CatDV panel notices it and then can push that back up to the facility so that other people can then get hold of the masters, and you're not left with only half the source content for your project. And all of that has been launched and released and is getting quite a lot of attention for a couple of months. So it's at our kind of no NAB announcement that came out. So do reach out to us. You can use that Vantage link. That's great. Or if you want to email us, sales@squarebox.com, and we'd be more than happy to help out.
Okay, great. All right, and then the last one. I feel like talking to Joe here, we should say long-time listener, first-time caller before we do this. I wish I could enable your audio, man. Joe asks, does V2 have a round-robin API to Vantage so it can hit more than one Vantage node? And Damien basically says his answer on this was, I already know this one, man, for you. He said, it's not technically around robin, but we can do multiple instances. So you can have multiple instances of the plugin. And then now with CatDV Pegasus Worker, you could round robin ahead of time. So you could do that. It is something we should probably talk to Telestream about, though, for really large deployments. It's something definitely we would like to, get into. But know that Pegasus Worker node has helped a lot. And so, we can actually talk to multiple systems. We have actually a customer right now that we're deploying this at, and they have, I think, 4 different brains in Vantage, so to speak. I don't always know all the terms. I think they might merge later, but for now they're just running these, they're running these 4 instances separately. So we'll be doing a little bit of that right now. But,
cool. And I know it's kind of breaking the rules a little bit, but I've got a question as well. So I know that North Shore's Dub project, Distribution Hub product, makes extensive use of Vantage integrations. And I think it would probably be remiss if we didn't have the opportunity just to spend a minute or two talking about how Dub makes use of a lot of this technology, both CatDV components and North Shore components, to solve business problems on the distribution side again. So do you want to take a minute or two to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, so that is one of the things about North Shore is we do these webinars with you guys, and people know us for writing these little applications and stuff and doing that or being the CatDV deployment people. I mean, obviously, Allison being with us, Chris Bushman, Damien Corbell, it's a lot of hours of really great, CatDV techs. But Damien's built a whole side of this business that's actually as big, in some years bigger than that, which is custom app development, enterprise development. And then, like you said, Dub, one of the bigger products that we've come out with is a distribution product. It's like a platform, and it's for doing a large scale VOD and OTT distribution. Well, obviously Vantage is dominant in that space, and they make all the flavors of all the files, and they have all this workflow. So again, we didn't want to start from scratch. So rather than do that, for instance, rather than write a MAM, we were able to say, oh, well, people already have all their stuff in CatDV. And rather than write all this broadcast automation, well, we already have Vantage. So we sort of transplanted the code from our original V1 plugin. And it actually has has almost kind of a V2 thing. So for instance, in Dub, if somebody was going to send out, let's just say, yeah, it is like a hybrid of the two. It led us that way. But if you were going to send a file, let's say you had to deliver a file package to Comcast for cable, you would have, caption files and artwork and video files and metadata. And so Dub would actually, in the interface of Dub, you would have all your metadata stored already. It's a big content metadata storage system. That would all get put out there in the system. And then basically it would look in CatDV and say, do you have the master for this? Or maybe let's say we needed an MPEG-2 mezzanine. It would say, do I have this MPEG-2 mezzanine? If I don't have it, the system goes, oh, okay, well, I'll just make it. And so we take that asset, that high-res master from CatDV, the selected one, and it gets automatically transcoded to Vantage. And then it actually gets checked back into CatDV and back into Dub so that it can become part of the distribution package.
Well, and the asset gets created in CatDV before the job is actually sent to Vantage. So
that's part of the hybrid. Yeah, there's almost a tracking record exactly in that way. Absolutely.
Very cool. So that's a large scale or mid scale broadcast distribution application that's been built using the APIs of both CatDV as a platform and Vantage as a platform. I think it's a great example of good technology design and then amazing innovation from your team to come up with the idea and then build it and deliver it for some pretty enormous customers too. So that's really cool. Very good. Very good. I think,
thanks a lot.
Does that bring us to the end of our questions, or is there any more?
Yeah, man. I think we're there. I mean, I think we've kept these people long enough. This has been, fun.
I think we have. Okay. So again, thank you all very much for your time, and we really appreciate it. Next week, Mastercat Workflows. Thank you again to our panelists and co-participants from North Shore. It's been really cool, and hopefully see you next week. Thank you all. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
CatDV